Nobody really liked Jenny very much. On the other hand, that was probably because nobody knew anything about her. Karen still remembered when Jenny walked into the classroom on the first day of school. She seemed to creep in, as if she were afraid somebody would notice her. She came in and sat in the back of the room and didn't talk to anyone the whole day. In fact, if Miss Henry, the teacher, hadn't made the whole class sit in alphabetical order, Karen probably never would have even spoken to her. But because Jenny's last name was Victor and Karen's was Wells, they sat next to each other in the rear of the room. When Karen tried to introduce herself that first day, she had little success. "Hi," she said. "I'm Karen." Jenny only nodded. "Hello," she said quietly. And that was all she said. Looking back on that moment as they walked to Jenny's house, Karen smiled. That was probably as far as things would have gone if it hadn't been for the elephant. Karen loved to collect miniatures. She was always getting her parents to buy her tiny tea sets and tiny chairs and things. One day, she brought a little carved elephant to recess to show her best friend Kelly. It was made of wood and was perfectly detailed, down to the 2 little nose holes at the end of the trunk. After recess, Karen put the carving on her desk. It wasn't until halfway through the class that she noticed that Jenny kept staring at the elephant. When the bell rang for lunch, Jenny turned toward her shyly. "May I see your elephant?" she asked quietly. Karen felt thrilled that Jenny was finally opening up. "Sure, just be careful. My parents just got it for me, and they will kill me if something happens to it." Jenny held the delicate carving in the palm of her hand and stared at it. "It's beautiful," she said. "Do you like things like this?" Karen asked her. Jenny nodded, still staring at the tiny object. "I've got a whole collection of stuff like this," Karen continued. "And my stepdad gave me these really neat minis from Asia. Villages carved inside eggshells and things like that. If you want, you can come over and see them." Jenny slowly put the elephant back on Karen's desk. She seemed to be thinking about it. Then she looked up at Karen and smiled. "Thank you. I'd like that." Karen shrugged. "Sure, no problem. How about tomorrow after school?" Jenny smiled again as she got up. "Okay," she said, and left the room. Karen carefully rewrapped the elephant in tissue paper and put it inside of a matchbox. Then she headed to lunch. Her friend Kelly was waiting for her, anxious to talk. "I don't believe it," she said, nodding toward where Jenny was sitting alone. "You actually got her to talk? What did she say?" "She really liked my elephant," Karen answered, still somewhat surprised by Jenny's reaction. "I told her she could come over to my house tomorrow and see the rest of my stuff." "And?" asked Kelly. "Is she?" "She said she'd like to," answered Karen. "I guess we'll have to check with our parents, though." Kelly shook her head. "Why do you try so hard to be everyone's friend?" "I think she's a nice person," Karen said. "She's just so shy that her own shadow scares her." The next day, Jenny went to Karen's house after school. Karen's parents weren't home, so the 2 girls had a snack, and Karen showed Jenny her entire collection of miniatures, from elephants and other animals to tiny carriages drawn by prancing horses. The jewel of her collection was the egg. A hole had been cut out from the front of it, and a tiny, delicate village carved out of ivory had been set inside. The interior of the shell had been painted to look like the village was placed in the mountains, with a powder blue sky above. "It's so beautiful," Jenny breathed. She looked shyly at Karen. "I collect miniatures too." "Oh, really?" Karen asked. "Like what?" "I brought something with me." Jenny paused. "If you want to see it." Karen smiled. "I'd love to." Jenny reached into her book bag and pulled out a small wooden box. She placed it on Karen's dresser, making sure to stand it on end. "Open it," she told Karen. Karen leaned closer and saw that the box was carved to look like a tiny wardrobe. It stood on 4 little feet, each finely detailed, and it had a tiny little knob on the front. Smiling, Karen pinched the doorknob between her thumb and forefinger and opened the closet door. "Wow," she gasped. Inside, there was a whole collection of miniature clothing. There were pants and blouses, simple dresses and elegant gowns, each one perfectly made, right down to buttons so small Karen could barely see them. At the bottom of the wardrobe were all different kinds of shoes. Again, each perfectly made, as if they were really meant to be worn. Karen looked at Jenny in amazement. "This is great! Where did you get this?" Jenny smiled. "It's from my dollhouse. I thought you might like it." "It's fantastic," said Karen. She carefully plucked out a dress on its hanger and examined it. It was about as long as her finger and looked exactly like a dress of normal size, right down to the zipper up the back. Then she placed it back inside the closet. "How come you've never brought up anything like this in school?" Karen asked. "You could probably make some friends." Jenny slowly put the closet away in her bag. "My dolls are my friends," she said quietly. "That's silly," Karen scoffed. "I'd like to be your friend." Jenny looked up quickly, and a smile flashed across her face. Then she looked back down at her feet. "I like that," she said. "If you want, you can come and see my dollhouse, too." Karen knew that her parents wouldn't be home for another couple of hours. "Is it anything like that closet?" Jenny smiled. "Oh, it's the best dollhouse in the world." Karen laughed. "Then I guess I have to see it." And maybe, Karen thought as they walked to Jenny's house, this would help her open up a little more. Jenny lived in a plain-looking brick house next to a vacant lot. The front lawn was overgrown and brown with a few green patches around the sprinkler heads. There were some ragged bushes along the house, and dried-up flowers in pots on the porch. Karen's mother was a fanatic gardener who would have fainted at the sight of this yard. Jenny led her up the walk and unlocked the front door. As she pushed it open, a musty smell floated out. The inside of the house was filthy. The shades were open, and the afternoon sun shone through the unwashed windows. There was a layer of dust over everything, and a stack of old TV dinner trays piled on the coffee table in front of the television. Toys littered the floor. Karen glanced into the kitchen to her right. It was even worse. Dirty glasses and silverware everywhere. The wastebasket overflowing, and Karen could smell decay. She wrinkled her nose in disgust. No wonder Jenny was so shy. Her parents must be pigs. She was probably too afraid to invite anyone over to the house. Karen turned to Jenny. Are your mom and dad at work? Jenny shook her head no. You'll meet them soon. She looked around the house as if noticing the mess for the first time, and Karen could tell that Jenny was embarrassed. Come on, she said quickly. The dollhouse is back here. She led Karen into the den. There, in the middle of the room, was the biggest dollhouse Karen had ever seen. It covered almost the entire floor and looked like a small mansion. Karen's mouth dropped open as she moved closer. Hedges of trees surrounded the huge yard. There was a circular driveway with a gate at either end. Karen knelt down to inspect the house closely, and she vaguely heard Jenny say that she would be right back. Every detail was perfect. 3 little brick chimneys poked out of the roof, and someone had even thought to put tiny little rain gutters filled with tiny little leaves. Karen moved even closer. The impressive front door had an intricate design of stained glass, with a brass knocker in the middle. Each window had a sill and shutters. The paint was gleaming white with blue trim. Karen peered into one of the windows. It was a dining room. The room was filled with furniture like the wardrobe Jenny had brought. There was a dining table with little plates and napkins set for dinner. A display case like her stepdad's stood in one side, with objects in it that were so small she couldn't even make them out. She moved on to the next room. A living room, also furnished in exquisite detail, and so were the rest of the rooms on the first floor. There were even tiny mirrors in the bathrooms. Karen stood back in amazement. There wasn't a single girl in school that wouldn't die to own this, and here was Jenny who never even mentioned it. She leaned forward again and looked into one of the rooms on the second floor. She didn't think she could be surprised any further. But then she saw the people. Seated in an upstairs den were a perfectly carved man and woman. The man was reading a tiny newspaper, and the woman looked to be knitting. But there was something strange about her. Karen leaned closer, and she realized what was strange. The woman's knitting needles were actually moving. Not believing her own eyes, she pressed her face against the window when the woman turned to look at her. She dropped her knitting and stood up. Then the man dropped his paper and ran to the window. Karen stumbled backward, and she heard a faint, high-pitched scream. "What's the matter?" asked Jenny from behind her. Karen whirled around to find Jenny standing there with a strange look on her face. "The people, they moved!" Jenny cocked her head to one side. "People?" she asked. Then she smiled. "Oh, you must mean my parents." Karen blinked. She must have heard incorrectly. But she started to back slowly away from Jenny. "What do you mean?" she asked in a hoarse voice. Jenny's smile disappeared. "They wanted to send me away, so I shrank them. They're the best part of my collection." Karen gulped her stomach down. The faint scream seemed to be getting louder. "You're crazy," she whispered loudly. "I'm going home." Jenny's eyes narrowed. "I thought you'd like my dollhouse," she said accusingly. "I thought you wanted to be my friend." Karen stumbled against the house, caught herself from falling and backed around it. "Get away from me!" she screamed. She suddenly realized that the high-pitched noise was coming from the rear of the dollhouse. She glanced down into the backyard to find it filled with children. All of them looked up at her, screaming in their tiny voices. "You're just like all the others," she heard Jenny say as her vision turned to black. "They said they were my friends, too."